All the classics all the time. It's Belfast 89 FM, and I'm Justin Macartney. And this afternoon, as promised, it's Dr. David Hume, MBE. He's a new book out called Tides of Time, and he's able to join us live now on Belfast 89 FM. Dr. Hume, it's fantastic to have you along. This new book of yours, it's not your first foray into publishing. You've several books under your belt.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all, Justin. Yeah, it's the latest of quite a number of books. I used to do books maybe every 2 or 3 years. I had a different book, but sometimes there's a bigger gap. So I had a book last year. This book, COVID helped this book along because it gave me a bit more time to read and to write the book then too. So yeah, it's a coastal history of East Antrim. I've always been really interested in seafaring traditions and the connection between communities and the coast that we have in this area particularly.
Well, I must admit, I was looking forward to it because I was lucky enough to be at your last launch. But the book's basically out in time for Christmas. It's not one specific theme, this book. There's lots of different stories in this book. How did you come up with the idea? Are these things you've been gathering over the decades then?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff there I just gathered up over the years. Just research, and I used to write a history column in the local paper, the Larne Times, for quite a number of years, and I would have got lots of stories, and people would have given me lots of the family stories about the seafaring connections over the years, and also just general things, sometimes unusual things. There's a incident, for example, of what's called a Fata Morgana, which is a climactic sort of situation where it appears that the landscape has appeared up in the clouds. So it depends on the climate and the atmosphere and so forth.
Wow.
So there's an account of that from just off Island Magee in the 19th century, and it involves Cairn Castle, the area around Cairn Castle, Scott Hill and Ballygally Castle, and the hill there at Ballygally, apparently in the clouds above. So it's quite a sort of situation that's documented in different parts of the world. So it's interesting that it happens there, and there appears to be a number of instances of it in that particular area. So it might be just an area because of the particular atmosphere there at a certain time. So lots of things like that, and then the more commonplace things that you might expect about shipwrecks and seafarers and so on.
Well, I must admit, I actually stepped out of the car once up there at Cairn Castle where they're filming that Hollywood movie. I'm sure it's about 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe longer. And we actually experienced a mountain spectre, and I actually caught it on video, or my friend caught it on video, and it's actually on YouTube. These things are phenomenal, but they're actually very curious when you actually experience them. You sort of go wow and take 2 steps back.
Yeah.
What sort of seafaring stuff did you come up with? Because a lot of people in Belfast, have family, friends, relatives that work down the docks or work in the shipyard, and everybody's familiar with the Antrim coast, the Causeway Coast Road there. What sort of great stories did you come up with there?
Oh, well, just some amazing stories. One of the stories, one of the families, Island Magee, of course, had lots of seafaring families, and believed that the more seafaring families per head than anywhere else in the British Isles. But the McMurtry family were one of the seafaring families, and one of them, one Captain McMurtry, was shipwrecked in the Pacific, a place hundreds and hundreds of miles from the coast, and they spent considerable time on this just island, which has very little shelter on it. Some of the men went off in the ship's boat, and it took them about, I think it was about 14 days to get to South America to try and get assistance. And they managed to survive it. It's quite an amazing story.
Wow.
And there were 2 brothers, 2 McMurtry brothers were on the one ship. And of course, in those days, we're talking about old windjammer ships, as they were called, large sailing ships. And in those days, people wouldn't have known at home that anything was wrong, other than the fact that the ship just didn't arrive. There was no communication like there is today, of course. So you find lots of stories, sad stories like that people washed overboard around Cape Horn and so forth, remembered on local gravestones in Island Magee and elsewhere. And just amazing stories. My own family, my great uncle, it would have been, he went to sea when he was 16 with the McMurtrys in Island Magee on the windjammers. And we have at home a relic which was just sort of uncovered a few years ago up in the attic. It's an old oilcloth, but it has a nautical painting of ships, old sailing ships and lighthouses on it and so on, which he had obviously done at some point when he had a bit of time in his hands. He was a ship's carpenter. So those sort of stories are just so commonplace among families, particularly in this coastal area. It was a way of life. Going to sea was a way of life for many families.
Fantastic. So where can people get their hands on this book if they're interested in getting a copy then?
Well, it's available locally in quite a number of bookshops, just in the Rinka and Isle the Gobbins Centre. It's available in Whitehead in the Bank House. Carrickfergus, the Secret Bookshelf in Carrickfergus. Book Nook in Larne, and Beattie's Shop in Ballycarry, and also through myself. If people contact me through my website, The Own Boy Hume, it can be sent out, posted out then directly. But those are the main outlets for it, and it's been going very well. The first order was actually from the Isle of Man, so that was quite a pleasant experience. First time I've had a book ordered from the Isle of Man, and there's some going to the United States, and I've had a few inquiries from elsewhere as well as just around Northern Ireland and England and Scotland, but Australia and New Zealand. There's one actually going to New Zealand, but via Glengormley. There's a guy I know in New Zealand. His father lives in Glengormley, so he's ordered the book, and it's been sent off to his father to get to him at some point then too. So, it's available in the local area.
I'm sure there'll be great interest, especially amongst the expat community. Dr. David Hume, MBE, author of Tides of Time, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on Belfast 89 FM.